Coming up on MilCyberSync, Russia taking control by creating its own transport layer security certificates. Also ahead, more Ukrainian cyber targets being attacked, plus Bridgestone tires, a ransomware target taking its trading facilities offline. Those stories and more, so get ready to get in sync with MilCyberSync.
You're watching the MilCyberSync Weekly News with your host Nick Thomas and news anchor Layla Gulin.
Hello and welcome to the MilCyberSync Podcast, reporting on events for the week ending March 17th. I'm your host Nick Thomas. Layla's taking a break this week, but don't fret. I have cyber subject matter expert Brad Rhodes filling in today. Brad is a longtime MCPA member and is helping prepare for the upcoming HammerCon event this coming May. In his day-to-day, Brad is a senior manager at Accenture Federal Services supporting numerous federal customers. In his other life, Brad is a colonel, cyber warfare, serving as the G6 Chief Information Officer for the 76th Operational Response Command. Brad also teaches cybersecurity at the graduate level and mentors cyber patriot teams at the high school level. You can find him on LinkedIn. Brad, welcome to the show. How are you doing this morning, sir?
I am good, Nick. It is great to be here with you. Lots of interesting topics to cover today, that's for sure.
All right, great. Let's dive right in. So our first topic, Brad, is TLS sanctions. The Russian government has established its own TLS certificate authority to address issues with accessing websites that have arisen in the wake of sanctions imposed by the West. Russia's Ministry of Digital Development is expected to provide a domestic replacement to handle the issuance and renewal of TLS certificates should they get revoked or expired. The service is offered to all legal entities operating in Russia, with the certificates delivered to site owners upon request within 5 working days. TLS certificates are used to digitally bind the cryptographic key to an organization's details, enabling web browsers to confirm the domain's authenticity and ensure that the communication between a client computer and the target website is secure. The proposal comes as companies like DigiCert have been restricted from doing business in Russia. Cybersecurity firms Avast, ESET, Fortinet, and Imperva have also suspended operations in Russia and Belarus over the Kremlin's invasion of Ukraine. So, Brad, this is big news. I know you know all about this stuff going on, so let's explain to the people, how does this work on a broader internet scale?
No, absolutely. So when you connect to a website and you want it to be secure, everybody knows, get the little green lock on the upper left-hand corner of the browser. Well, if the server itself doesn't have a root certificate, you can't do the binding like you just talked about. And so by the fact that you have certificate providers pulling out of operations in Russia means that their websites, their state-owned enterprises, their companies, anything that's going on in Russia now has an unsecure connection. And many browsers today, many modern browsers today, don't allow you to connect to a website that doesn't allow it to be done securely. According to Cisco, about 90% or better of internet traffic today is TLS SSL encrypted. And so Russia really here is taking a preemptive strike to allow their citizens to continue to operate in the face of all of the sanctions.
Wow, that's very important stuff there. Speaking of which, one of the firms, ESET, their security researchers have identified another data wiper targeting Ukrainian organizations. It's the third destructive malware identified since Russia began its invasion of the country, and it's dubbed CaddyWiper. The threat does not show significant code similarities with known malware families and has been used only against a small number of organizations so far. CaddyWiper erases user data and partition information, but does not destroy the information stored on domain controllers. This allows the attackers to maintain access to the compromised networks. The newly identified malware is being deployed via default domain policy. This suggests that the attackers had access to the compromised network prior to executing the malware. And just another point here, Brad, we were talking about how the TLS certificates were being unsecure, right? So this is an easy way for the CaddyWiper to get in, no?
It can be, definitely. CaddyWiper really is built specifically to go after those direct targets. So, when you see something like that, very much designed for, nation state activity. And so when we look at a wiper and the 3 wipers that have been deployed in Ukraine to this point, again, pretty well built, very targeted, and could potentially take advantage of something like that. I don't think anybody in Ukraine is going to be reaching back to any Russian sites anytime soon, so I don't think they have much to worry about there.
Exactly. Good stuff. So the German subsidiary of Russian energy giant ROSENEFT has been hit by a cyber attack. ROSENEFT at Deutschland reported the incident last week and says it subsequently took its systems offline, but its pipelines and refineries continue to operate as normal. The company was warned in early March of a heightened risk of cyber attacks and an increased threat situation for Germany after Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and advised businesses to increase its security measures. Other companies in the oil industry have now been issued a new cybersecurity warning. The hacker group Anonymous has claimed responsibility and says it had captured 20 terabytes of data. ROSENEFT Deutschland says it has been responsible for around a quarter of all crude oil imports to Germany in recent years and has stakes in 3 refineries in the country. So this is big news, especially what happened to us in the past 6 months with energy and the Colonial Pipeline attack. Looks like this might be headed down the same path. Your thoughts?
Well, obviously, I think there's some definitely goodness here. The fact that the pipelines are still operating means that they've done a good job, likely, of segmenting their networks from their IT versus their operational technology. And that's an important piece here. You have to have some deliberate thought when you're planning and building your networks to make sure that organizations are going to be able to operate in the face of cyber attacks. Not surprising that you see an attack against, importers of energy into Europe. That's a very easy way for a group like Anonymous or other hacktivists to make that statement, to say, hey, we want you to stop this. It's really interesting to me, in particular with Anonymous, because, they've come back over the last 30 days with everything going on in Ukraine, and they've been quiet for a while. And so hopefully they're, a force for good, if you will. But again, Anonymous is one of those organizations out there that they operate in the gray space. You don't quite know, whether they're good, whether they're bad, and who they're actually going to target next. And so that's very, very interesting development. But again, the fact that they're still able to operate is definitely positive. It means that they did think about their security before they actually, put everything together.
And a little bit of zero trust architecture going on there with the segmentation, which you should be doing
Absolutely.
anyway. Right?
I really don't trust anybody. Even in my own home network, I've got segmentation. So it's one of those basic things that you should consider and should do, no matter the size of your organization.
All right. Moving on, we have more Russian news. A Russian-speaking ransomware outfit likely targeted an unnamed entity in the gambling and gaming sector in Europe and Central America. Researchers say the ransomware repurposed custom tools developed by other APT groups like Iran's Muddy Water. The ransomware is called SockBot. A modified variant is a Golang binary that's designed to expose internal assets from a compromised network to the internet in a stealthy and secure manner. The unusual attack chain involved the abuse of stolen credentials to gain unauthorized access to the victim network. This led to the deployment of Cobalt Strike payloads on compromised targets. Although the infection was contained at this stage, the researchers characterized the compromise as a case of a suspected ransomware attack. So, Brad, what exactly is Golang?
Yeah, so Golang is basically Google's rebuild of the C++ programming language. It's everything that we would have wanted C++ to be, if we could have built it from the ground up with today's technology. And so Golang allows you to create binaries that will run on multiple platforms, but really are very good at running on Windows. And so the thing you find with Golang is that depending on which, antivirus, anti-malware program you're running, it may or may not know what to do with the Golang binary. It might look at that Golang binary and go, oh, it kind of looks like C++. I'll just let it run. And so attackers are well aware of this. I won't say it's a new development, but over the last couple of years, we've seen attackers really get into building binaries with Golang because A, they're very stable, B, they're very lightweight, and C, they work just like C++. And so they pretty much will run very, very well on anything that can run C++.
So we're seeing more use of this going on then.
Absolutely. It's again, the attackers are going to adapt and figure out the things that are going to allow them to get behind the defenses that exist. And so it's really, they're willing and able to do just about anything and use just about any tool out there. I like to tell people that, whether it's code, Kali Linux, pick a thing, any tool in cyber is kind of like the lightsaber in Star Wars. If you pick it up and you use it for good, you've got the blue lightsaber and you're on the light side. If you pick it up and use it for bad, it's a red lightsaber, and you're definitely not doing the right stuff.
All right. Good Star Wars I mentioned there. Moving on. CISA and the FBI have released a joint advisory warning that Russia-backed threat actors hacked the network of an unnamed non-governmental entity. They did so by exploiting a combination of flaws, allowing them to enroll a new device for Duo MFA and access the victim network via the print nightmare flaw. The attack was pulled off by gaining initial access to compromised credentials obtained by means of a brute force password guessing attack. The breached account was unenrolled from Duo due to a long period of inactivity, but had not yet been disabled in the NGO's Active Directory, thereby allowing the attackers to escalate their privileges. CISA and FBI recommend organizations to enforce and review multi-factor authentication, disable inactive accounts, and prioritize patching for known exploited flaws. So, Brad, why are printers an easy target?
Because they're like Linux. They're just basically Linux machines,
and they're just sitting there on all the time.
They're just sitting there on all the time. And I always say it's always a fun experiment. On your, when you're sitting at home, pull open your phone, open up your Wi-Fi, and see how many printers your neighbors have.
You'll see the HP, you'll see the LaserJet Direct.
Yeah, exactly. And don't print to those, but you could print to those and directly because they're out there. And what happens is a lot of organizations, they put these printers on the network and they think, oh, it's just a printer. No, it is another endpoint on the network. It has to have some smarts. It runs a cut down version of Linux. And in most cases, those kernels can't be updated. And so once you put we always do this all the time in our business. We put stuff onto the network. We leave it there. 5 years later, the printer that we put on the network 5 years ago is still working, and it's a great printer. However, it stopped getting updates 3 years ago. You weren't ever able to update the kernel that's running to drive the printer, and now you are exposed. That's like one of the very first things that attackers do when they pop into a network is they look for printers, because printers typically are very vulnerable and are a great place to hang out and persist.
And they're wide open with SNMP public is usually the password and the way to get in, right?
Yeah, usually SNMP public. They'll have the universal printing port up and running 995. There's all these things on the printer. I found this at my house. I buffer overflowed my wife's printer. Don't ever do that. It's a terrible idea. It hasn't worked the same since.
All right, moving on, more attacks here. 2 suspected ransomware operators in the KASEYA attack have been extradited to the United States from Ukraine and Canada. A 22-year-old Ukrainian national was allegedly part of the attack that infected about 1,500 customers of the Miami-based IT managed service software provider with the malicious Revel code. He's been charged with conspiracy to commit fraud and money laundering. A 34-year-old Canadian was also extradited and is accused of using a sophisticated form of ransomware known as NetWalker, which targeted companies, municipalities, emergency services, and academic institutions in 2020. He has been charged with conspiracy to commit computer fraud and wire fraud and damaging a protected computer. Israel's National Cyber Directorate said that the country suffered a cyber attack that briefly took down a number of government websites this week. The denial of service attack has been identified on a communications provider which prevented access to a number of other sites as well. Previous hacks on Israeli websites have been attributed to attackers linked to Iran. It was not immediately clear who carried out the hack. Iran and Israel have been locked in a shadow war that includes cyber attacks as well as targeting of physical sites. Well, we've got more to come, creating more military cyber synchronization. Details after the break.
Today's network and security monitoring solutions are vulnerable to overload situations that lead to decreased visibility and undetected intrusions. Monitoring applications require hardware to keep up with real-time traffic analysis, making it complex and costly. Your security monitoring solutions may be unable to keep up during cyber attacks or traffic spikes, making intrusion more likely. A new approach is needed to increase network protection and visibility. Excelio simplifies and streamlines your network monitoring for critical security, network, and application analysis. Learn more at excelio.com.
Welcome back to the show. Exploitation of Chrome's vulnerabilities keeps going up. The number of malicious attacks has been increasing over the past years, and Google believes several factors have contributed to this trend. There were 14 exploitations in 2021, up from 8 in 2020 and 2 in 2019. One reason for the increasing number of zero-day attacks targeting Chrome is related to transparency. Browser security teams and research groups are increasingly informing the public about in-the-wild exploitation of vulnerabilities. Specifically, threat actors often exploited Adobe Flash vulnerabilities in web attacks before the software was killed off. And now they are focusing more on the browser itself. Chrome is targeted far more often than Firefox, Safari, and Internet Explorer. Google said recently that it paid out nearly $9 million in bug bounties last year, including roughly $3 million for Chrome vulnerabilities. So, Brad, Chrome is used just about everywhere, and everyone uses it. What are the risks exactly to the average user that's not aware of what's going on?
Well, it's a great question. So everybody uses a web browser.
Right.
You, if you have done any degree of work from home during the pandemic, which I think is most of us, if you are accessing Office 365, the Google productivity suite, you pick a thing, your company's timesheet application, you did it via a web browser. The bad guys know this. Google Chrome is a good, all the browsers are interesting. They each do something a little bit better than the other. And there's lots of browser choices out there, but Google Chrome, similar to what we see, we always say, what is the most ubiquitous browser out there? It's Google Chrome. It's on everything. It's on your phones. It's on your laptops. It's everywhere. Just like back in the day when we said, oh my gosh, Windows is 80% of the desktop market, which is about what it is still. You're going to go after the thing that is used the most. That's kind of the rub here. But the thing is you've got to keep your stuff updated. B, understand that Google Chrome is a really complex application. It's got almost 8 million lines of software code. It literally has many plugins you can put in it. Do you trust those plugins? I don't know. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. Right. So Google Chrome has many potential attack surfaces that a bad guy is going to go after. And it's not surprising to see this continue on and see Google Chrome targeted because it is probably the most prolific browser out there today.
And also it uses a lot of memory too.
Oh, it is. It is a very resource intensive browser, but it does. Again, there's a lot of that. We're just so used to the really pretty graphics and everything like that. It's not back when I started doing this thing and we had Gopher. It was the greatest search engine ever.
All right, moving on. A well-known ransomware group is threatening to leak files stolen from tire and rubber giant Bridgestone. Bridgestone decided to disconnect many of its manufacturing and retreading facilities in the Americas from its network, which led to some plant operations getting shut down and employees being sent home. A cybercrime gang that has been using the Lockbit 2.0 ransomware has taken credit for the attack on Bridgestone and is now threatening to make public all available data. The tire manufacturer has 50 production facilities and 55,000 employees. It's unclear how much money the hackers are hoping to make, but they are known to demand tens of millions of dollars from big companies. And Brad, I believe this is where you get into ICS/OT, and with the ransomware taking control of those PLCs and all those machines, it's a total shutdown to factories, which means no income, people can't work. Things like that.
It's absolutely a big impact. And the thing to think about here is it's not necessarily the OT devices themselves, but it's those central controllers. And the central controllers are typically, they're custom built, embedded Windows type systems, could be Linux as well, but usually Windows. And they're great because they're graphical user interface. I can connect this thing to this thing and, it greens up and all the sensors work and everything like that. But if you actually get ransomware and you get your controllers hit, which are a central control point for your systems, all bets are off. The only thing you can do at that point is shut down and potentially rebuild or replace. And that takes time. And that's the impact here. And that's, I think it's lost in the sauce sometimes, is that there really is a true, in the real world impact to these types of events. There is we have gone beyond the oh my gosh, those cyber guys, they're just telling us stuff. They're just scaring us. No. This is a real monetary impact to this tire manufacturer, and we see this time and time and again. And frankly, I think it's a bit underreported that we see these attacks happen. And we just sort of go, well, it's just the cost of doing business on the internet today. No, it's not. This is why we invest in cybersecurity. This is why we, bring in experts to help us to give that honest assessment of where we're at with our network, and then understand that we're probably going to have to commit some resources to actually fix things and make it better.
Awesome. Moving on, good words there. U.S. Cyber Command is looking to more tightly link cyberspace operations with information operations to synchronize and integrate an information warfare approach. This includes subordinate commands taking on a larger role in information warfare for their respective services, reorganizing and consolidating similar capabilities. The command has already sent messages to Russian cyber operatives letting them know the U.S. military knows who they are and what they're doing as a means of deterring their potential future malicious activity aimed against the United States. The DoD will need to harness emerging technologies such as artificial intelligence, big data analytics, and even quantum computing to be truly successful in the future. Brad, we hear a lot about disinformation today. And is this something the public should be aware of, and how do they recognize it?
Great question. So one, absolutely, we should be 100% concerned with disinformation today. In your social media feeds, you are getting hit with disinformation, whether you realize it or not. You just have to try to pay attention to things and see what it looks like. I'll give you a practical example. Several years ago, I was forward deployed and I was checking my social media. It was Veterans Day of all things, and I came across a post, and it was a repost from a really large veterans organization, and it said, "Hey, can we get 10,000 likes for this angel fire?" And so an angel fire is where, if you've ever seen like an air show when one of the, like a C-130 takes off and then kicks out its flares, and it looks really cool. It's a really great picture. And there's things that you can get that sort of the spider sense. I went, something's not right about that picture. And I looked a little closer. It was a Russian transport plane. Not a C-130, not a C-17, a Russian transport plane. And I felt bad because this, high-end veterans organizations does a lot of great work, had been totally trolled by the Russians. They were reposting this picture that they thought was legitimate, didn't do their homework. We see all of the deep fakes out there, things like that. You just don't know. And so, my recommendation always is to be very leery of what you see online. Take a minute and ask yourself, if it doesn't, is that real? does it seem right? And if it doesn't, if you don't feel right about it, it's probably disinformation. And that's one of the challenges today. And that's why, Cybercom here is talking about the need to do this and synchronize all of that, because the information environment is so much more than the news you see, so much more than your social media. It's the underpinnings of cyberspace. It's everything that we do. And human beings, we're inherently creatures that like to consume information. And so this is a really important step for Cybercom.
Okay, good stuff. The U.S. Army is embarking on a digital transformation to enable fresh access to commercial cloud offerings and more strategic and secure applications of technology and data. Major General Matt Easley says Army Vantage is now being used by over 35,000 people worldwide. It's being used to assist decision-making across the Army's ranks and provides authoritative data, common operating pictures, and custom tools for analysis. Army Vantage is an Army-wide data management program and platform. Among the various modernization efforts, Easley says it includes a new model for how the military branch buys, secures, and builds cloud services through a multi- and hybrid cloud mission. He also says the Army Digital Transformation Strategy outlines multiple initiatives to ensure a leveraging of data for accurate and efficient decision-making and scale data management efforts to better enable access to large data sets. Easley now serves as the Deputy Principal Information's Operations Advisor to the Defense Secretary. So, Brad, are you seeing this in your ranks with everything that you're doing?
Yep, we're well on our way to the A365 migration, so moving to our tenant on the Army side of the house, and there's a lot of great capabilities that are coming with that, and synchronizing across all three compos: active duty, National Guard, and Reserve. And again, very excited to see all of the progress that's being made to get to the point where the Army is really a cloud-enabled entity, on par with some of the largest organizations in the world.
And is this modernization helping secure the supply chain?
Supply chain is challenging. It does from a software perspective, like we're all operating on a platform that allows us to have that consistency. But keep in mind, the supply chain is so much bigger than that, and it reaches out way farther away. And I always tell people, the longer your supply chain, the less visibility you actually have. And so sometimes, that's why we do all the testing when we go out and procure stuff on the military side of the house. We bring a lot of things in, we test it, we verify it, to make sure that we aren't seeing a compromised supply chain. But in the long term, moving more of our capacity and capability into the cloud is really going to help with that.
Okay. Well, in more modernization, Verizon has just scored nearly $1 billion in enterprise infrastructure solutions task order awards with the Defense Department. The 3 awards will supply enhanced technical support and network modernization services at the Pentagon and elsewhere. The public and private partners also intend to produce and refine a long-term strategic information technology vision for the U.S. defense realm. The effort will involve converting more than 52,000 voice lines to an integrated environment that enables voice and video services along the 5G network. A dedicated support team will help implement upgrades and introduce new equipment. Security researchers have identified 4 data wipers targeting organizations in Ukraine, including Whispergate, Hermetic Wiper, and Isaac Wiper since the start of the year. And we talked about that earlier, Brad. A new Linux bug, newly discovered security flaw in the Linux kernel, could be leveraged by a local adversary to gain elevated privileges on vulnerable systems. This allows the bad actor to execute arbitrary code, escape containers, or induce a kernel panic. The vulnerability impacts Linux kernel versions 5.4 through 5.6.10 and is a result of a heap out of bounds write in the netfilter subcomponent in the kernel. The flaw relates to an issue with incorrect handling of the framework's hardware offload feature that could be weaponized by a local attacker to cause a denial of service or possibly execute arbitrary code. NetFilter is a framework provided by the Linux kernel that enables various networking-related operations, including packet filtering, network address translation, and port translation. A cyber breach of 3 healthcare service providers in Alabama and Colorado has resulted in more than 1 million individuals' information being compromised. The most recent and impactful cyber attack targeted South Denver Cardiology Associates and resulted in the data of more than 287,000 patients being exfiltrated. The healthcare firm says it started notifying impacted individuals last week, but made no mention whether ransomware was used in the attack. Potentially compromised data may have included names, birth dates, driver's license numbers, social security numbers, and various other patient data. Patient medical records, however, were not compromised. And Brad, I've been reporting a lot on healthcare recently. What do you think the deal is with cybersecurity and healthcare? What's going wrong there?
I think the challenge in healthcare is a couple of things. One, they're very focused on patient care, and that's obviously what we want them to do. But the challenge is that in order to truly secure a healthcare organization, a hospital, a provider, costs a lot of money. And so what are they going to do? This is no fault of the provider, right? Are they going to buy the new machine that's going to help their patients, or are they going to invest a bunch in cybersecurity? Right. It comes down to the priorities and things like that. And I'm not saying that, neither one of those are equal priorities in my mind. We should be doing both of them. But the challenge is, and you hit on one thing that's really concerning to me here, is that the organization didn't say whether it was ransomware or not. So honestly, we have got to get past ourselves here. We have to get to the point where we are willing to share and say, look, I'm an organization. I got hit with ransomware. We think it was this one, all of those things. Because if we don't do that, we are just giving the initiative back to the threat actors. We're just saying, hey, just keep hitting us. We're not going to talk about you. And we've got to stop that. That's a huge problem that we've got to figure out a way to get beyond, so that we're actually sharing data as opposed to trying to protect our reputations, because everybody's vulnerable today.
Good stuff, Brad. AMD last week informed customers that it has updated mitigations for a variant of the SPECTRE side channel attack. The update comes in response to research conducted by Intel. The Meltdown and SPECTRE attack methods were disclosed on January 2018. The most dangerous of the SPECTRE attacks was dubbed SPECTRE V2 and SPECTRE BTI. The methods can be exploited to obtain potentially sensitive bits of information from a device's memory by abusing CPUs. In response to the discovery of the Meltdown and SPECTRE attacks, Intel, AMD, ARM, and other affected CPU vendors implemented mitigations that should prevent attacks. However, those mitigations can, in some cases, be bypassed. And Brad, I know that there's some companies out there now that's actually doing research on the CPU itself and looking for those attacks. Do you have any information on anything like that?
Yeah, that's a big research area now. It's the hardware thing, but a couple of things here. One, some of these attacks, right? You have to have local access. You have to be able to touch the machine. I'm not saying it's not bad, but it's one of those things to think about when we think about vulnerabilities. But when it comes to CPUs, I guess the secret they don't tell you is that depending on the CPU you have, if you're like me, I'm a research guy. I have ancient laptops lying around my house. They're all SPECTRE and Meltdown vulnerable, and they're not patchable. And so we have to start thinking about lifecycle stuff. Eventually, you're going to have to replace things. And so it's important that you actually look and determine whether you actually have microchips, processors in your servers, in your machines that are no longer going to be updated. And then you're going to have to figure out how to pay to replace those.
Awesome. Well, our last story, Brad, the U.S. Army Combat Capabilities Development Command Aviation and Missile Center, wow, that's a lot, and the Alabama School of Cyber Technology and Engineering officially signed a partner in education agreement last month. This establishes a relation between DevCom, AVMC Software Simulation, Systems Engineering and Integration Directorate, and the Magnet High School. Beginning in the fall, ASCTE will select students to participate in an internship at S3I. Interns will work in a team environment while experiencing lab environments, learning project management and project life cycles, and applying risk management framework principles. ASCTE was founded in 2018 as the nation's only high school focused on the integration of cyber technology and engineering into all academic disciplines. So Brad, part of MCPA's mission is STEM education. How can MCPA members and our listeners get involved in opportunities like this?
Awesome. Again, really excited to see something like this. There should be more partnerships like this. Universities, government organizations should be reaching down to that high school level. That's the next generation. That's the kids that are going to come up, and they're going to take, Nick, they're going to take my place. They're going to take your place at some point. And we want them to be, we want them to be super smart and ready to go. One of the great things that one of our great partners at MCPA is the U.S. Cyber Patriot, which is the high school level cyber defense competition. And for my fellow members out there, that is a great place to engage. That is a great place to provide mentoring, share some of your expertise. It's not a big time commitment, and really see these kids take off. Another one that I really like is the Collegiate Cyber Defense Competition, the CCDC. So it's held at the national level every year, but there are regionals around the country, and they're always looking for people to come in and play red team, white team, green team, and really get in the mix and see what the university students are doing at that level. So lots of many opportunities. Get involved in the Civil Air Patrol. There's so many places out there that have this cyber STEM education thing right now, and they're just looking for people like Nick, like me, like you to come get involved and to help, champion the next generation.
That's great information, Brad, and thank you so much for being with me today and sharing all your knowledge and wisdom.
Happy to be here.
And great. That's going to do it for us. So thank you for watching, and you're now in sync with MilCyberSync.